I'd rather finance a Cold War than plan another goddamn signature cocktail menu for Nadia's friends. That thought rattled through my skull as I nursed my third cup of coffee, watching my fiancée prance around our upscale apartment in nothing but a silk robe and an attitude that could cut glass. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Holden, did you transfer the money for the flowers? Nadia called from the kitchen, her voice carrying that particular pitch that meant I was already in trouble for something I hadn't done yet. Which flowers? I asked, though I knew the answer would involve at least 4 zeros and some pretentious Latin name for what normal people call roses. The centerpieces, obviously. The ones we discussed with Margot yesterday. She appeared in the doorway, perfectly manicured nails wrapped around a green smoothie that probably cost more than most people's lunch. You were there, Holden. Try to keep up. I was there, all right. Sitting in that overpriced florist shop while Nadia and her business partner Margot debated the emotional resonance of peonies versus hydrangeas, like they were negotiating world peace. As a financial advisor, I've seen people make million-dollar decisions with less deliberation than Nadia put into napkin colors. I'll handle it today, I said, pulling up my banking app. That's when I saw it. A notification that made my coffee taste like ash. A $3,000 transfer to Brooks R. at 11:47 p.m. last night. The same night Nadia claimed she was at a late fitting with her seamstress. If that's for a dress, it better come with a car. Actually, babe, I said, keeping my voice casual. Looks like you already handled some transfers. Brooks R? New vendor? Nadia's smoothie glass paused halfway to her lips. For just a second, her perfectly composed expression flickered. Oh, it's complicated. Wedding stuff. You wouldn't understand. Right. Because after 8 years in financial planning, I couldn't possibly grasp the complexity of writing a check. The next few days unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Nadia's bridal fittings stretched until midnight. Her phone buzzed with texts that made her giggle like a teenager. She started paying for things in cash, which, for Nadia, was like watching a vampire avoid mirrors. Technically possible, but deeply unnatural. I did what any reasonable person would do. I investigated. Turns out Brooks R. was Rylan Brooks, a 35-year-old failed musician who lived in a converted warehouse downtown and hadn't held a steady job since the Obama administration. Social media told the rest of the story. Nadia featured prominently in his Instagram posts, usually captioned with vomit-inducing phrases like "my muse" and "inspiration strikes in mysterious ways." The mystery wasn't so mysterious anymore. Sunday morning arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train. Nadia emerged from our bedroom wearing a white sundress that probably cost more than my first car, her hair styled in those effortless waves that take 2 hours and a professional to achieve. "Ready for brunch with the girls?" she asked, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "Can't wait," I lied. The restaurant was exactly what you'd expect from Nadia's crowd: exposed brick, reclaimed wood, and a menu that charged $28 for eggs Benedict because they were made with locally sourced, free-range, organic everything. The kind of place where the waitstaff had graduate degrees and the mimosas came with a side of pretension. Tessa was already there, phone in hand, documenting her avocado toast for her Instagram followers. At 29, she'd turned being professionally beautiful into an actual career, complete with sponsorship deals and a ring light that traveled everywhere she did. "Holden!" she squealed, jumping up to air kiss both my cheeks. "You look tired. Wedding planning wearing you down?" Something like that. Layla arrived next, Nadia's coworker from the boutique. Quiet, observant, the kind of person who noticed everything and said nothing. She nodded at me politely before sliding into the booth next to Tessa. Freddie completed our little group, arriving fashionably late in a designer jacket that probably cost more than most people's rent. Nadia's self-appointed gay best friend, he had opinions about everything and the vocabulary to express them in cutting detail. "Darling," he said, settling into his seat with theatrical flair, "you simply must tell me you've reconsidered the color scheme. That salmon pink is doing absolutely nothing for your complexion." For 20 minutes I sat there listening to them dissect every aspect of our wedding like it was a science experiment. The flowers, the venue, the band, the photographer, every detail scrutinized and debated with the intensity of a Supreme Court case. That's when Nadia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her entire face lit up. Not the polite smile she gave the waiter or the practiced grin she flashed for Tessa's camera. This was something else entirely, pure, unfiltered joy. She typed back quickly, fingers flying over the screen, completely absorbed in her conversation with whoever was on the other end. "Earth to Nadia," Freddie said. "We're discussing your future happiness here." "Sorry," she said, not looking sorry at all. She put the phone face down on the table, but her hand kept drifting toward it like a magnet. The final straw came when she excused herself to the bathroom and left her phone behind. It buzzed once, twice, 3 times. Layla glanced at it, then at me, her expression unreadable. The 4th buzz was accompanied by a preview that made me freeze. "Can't wait for tonight, beautiful. R." When Nadia returned, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were bright. She looked like someone who'd just made a decision that would change everything. She was right about that part. "I have something to tell you all," she announced, her voice carrying across the restaurant's brunch chatter. The surrounding tables started to quiet down, sensing drama in the air. "Holden and I—" She paused, savoring the moment like a fine wine. "We're calling off the wedding." The silence was deafening. Tessa's mimosa glass stopped halfway to her lips. Freddie's fork clattered against his plate. Even the neighboring tables had gone quiet, their conversations fading as they tuned in to our personal disaster. "Actually," Nadia continued, her voice gaining strength, "I'm calling it off. I don't love you anymore, Holden. I haven't for a long time. You're just safe, boring, and I deserve better than safe." The words hit like physical blows, but I kept my expression neutral. 8 years of financial planning had taught me how to maintain composure when everything was falling apart around me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the engagement ring I'd been carrying for the past 3 days, ever since I'd figured out what was really going on. I placed it gently on the table between us, the diamond catching the morning light. "Thank you," I said quietly. "Thank you?" Nadia's voice cracked slightly. This wasn't going according to her script. "For being honest?" "Finally." I stood up, pulling out my wallet and dropping enough cash to cover my meal. "Ladies, gentlemen, I hope you'll join me next weekend for my Dodged a Bullet party. Details to follow." The restaurant was silent now. 50 people watching our personal drama unfold like it was dinner theater. I leaned down and kissed Nadia's cheek, whispering just loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "Give Rylan my regards." Then I walked out, leaving her sitting there with her mouth open and her carefully planned moment of triumph crumbling around her like a house of cards. I smiled at the silence. Let them chew on that. Brunch was about to get spicy. By Monday morning, I was already 3 moves ahead. The beauty of being engaged to someone for 2 years is that you end up financially entangled in ways that don't immediately untangle themselves. Nadia had gotten comfortable with the idea that my money was her money, especially when it came to wedding expenses. She was about to learn the difference. My first call was to Enchanted Events, the wedding planning company that had been bleeding us dry for months. Patricia, our coordinator, answered on the 2nd ring. "Holden, how are the final preparations coming along?" "There won't be any final preparations, Patricia. The wedding's off." A pause. Oh my. I'm so sorry to hear that. Of course, you understand that at this late date, the cancellation fees will be charged to whichever account originally made the payments, I interrupted. Check your records. I think you'll find that most of the deposits came from accounts solely in my name. Another pause, this one longer. Let me check on that and get back to you. You do that. The florist was next, then the caterer, then the photographer. Same conversation, same outcome. By lunchtime, I'd effectively frozen every vendor that Nadia thought was locked in for our dream wedding. My phone started ringing around 2 p.m. What the hell did you do? Nadia's voice was shrill with panic. Margot just called me. She says the flower order is canceled and they want their deposit back immediately. I didn't do anything, I said truthfully. I simply clarified which accounts were responsible for which expenses. Since you're the one who called off the wedding, I assumed you'd want to handle the vendors yourself. You can't just… This is sabotage. This is business, Nadia. Something you'd understand if you'd ever actually paid for anything yourself. The line went silent. That evening, I met my best friend Greg at his rooftop bar downtown. Greg had been tending bar for 15 years, which meant he'd seen every variety of human drama and developed the kind of cynical wisdom that comes from watching people's worst impulses play out in public. So she really did it, he said, sliding a whiskey across the bar. Announced it at brunch like some kind of performance art. Complete with audience participation. And you're sure about the other guy? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd been collecting. Bank transfers, social media posts, text message previews, the digital breadcrumbs of a modern affair. Rylan Brooks, 35, unemployed musician, living in a converted warehouse that Nadia's been helping him afford. Greg whistled low. She's been paying his rent? Rent, studio time, equipment, you name it. $3,000 just last week. I took a sip of whiskey, savoring the burn. Turns out my fiancée was keeping a pet artist. What's your next move? I grinned. Ever heard of the domino effect? Tuesday morning, I put phase 2 into motion. A few carefully crafted emails to the right people, each one containing just enough information to be devastating without being libelous. The first went to Ryland's landlord, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Chen, who owned half the converted warehouses in that neighborhood. The email included screenshots of Nadia's bank transfers and a polite inquiry about whether she was aware that one of her tenants was having his rent paid by a third party without disclosure. The second went to Nadia's parents. Richard and Eleanor Mercer were old-school East Coast money, the kind of people who valued reputation above almost everything else. They'd never particularly liked me. I was too blue-collar for their taste. But they absolutely despised freeloaders and social embarrassment. The third went to Layla. That one was the most important, because Layla was the key to everything that happened next. She was quiet, observant, and secretly jealous of Nadia's success. More importantly, she was plugged into the gossip network that kept their social circle running. The email to Layla was simple. Thought you should know what really happened at brunch. Nadia's been funding her affair with joint wedding money. Thought you deserved to know the truth. I attached the same screenshots and sat back to wait. I didn't have to wait long. By Wednesday afternoon, the vendors were descending on Nadia's boutique like vultures on roadkill. I happened to be across the street at a coffee shop when it started, purely by coincidence, of course. The florist arrived first. Margot, Nadia's business partner, was a tiny woman with the personality of a hurricane. She burst through the boutique's front door like she was breaching a fortress, her voice carrying clearly across the street. "Where's my money, Nadia? The bank rejected the charge and my supplier is threatening to sue." Then came the caterer, a large man in chef's whites who looked like he could bench press a wedding cake. He planted himself in the doorway, arms crossed, while Nadia gestured frantically at her computer screen. The photographer showed up next, then the wedding planner, then the rental company. Within an hour, there was a small crowd gathered outside Nadia's boutique, and none of them looked happy. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Nadia emerged from the shop looking like she'd been through a blender. Her perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, and her designer dress wrinkled from stress. She was trying to juggle multiple conversations while people shouted questions and demands at her from all directions. "I don't understand," she kept saying. "The money was supposed to be there. Holden was handling the payments." "Well, where is Holden?" demanded the photographer. "Because my contract says payment was due yesterday." The wedding is postponed," Nadia stammered. "Postponed or cancelled?" asked Margot. "Because if it's cancelled, I need my deposit back today." That's when Tessa arrived, phone already out, Instagram story already rolling. She took one look at the chaos and did what she did best, turned it into content. "Oh my God, what's happening?" she asked, zooming in on Nadia's panicked face. "This looks like drama." "Turn that off," Nadia snapped, but it was too late. The video was already live, broadcasting to Tessa's 10,000 followers in real time. The crowd was growing. Other shop owners came out to see what the commotion was about. Pedestrians stopped to gawk. Someone in the crowd recognized Nadia from social media and started filming with their own phone. Within minutes, Nadia's public humiliation was being documented from multiple angles and shared across multiple platforms. I watched from across the street, sipping my coffee and enjoying the show. She looked at me like I'd set her world on fire. The truth? I was just getting warmed up. Finding Rylan Brooks turned out to be easier than I'd expected. When you're living off someone else's money and desperate for attention, you tend to leave a pretty obvious digital trail. His Venmo account was public, showing a steady stream of payments from Nadia over the past 6 months. Rent money. Studio time. You're the best babe. Each transaction a little love note that painted a picture of a man who'd found his golden goose. His Instagram was even better. Constant check-ins at local venues, coffee shops, and bars, usually accompanied by brooding selfies and captions about the artistic struggle. The kind of guy who thought wearing a leather jacket and not combing his hair made him Jim Morrison. Thursday evening, I decided to pay him a visit. The converted warehouse district was exactly what you'd expect from someone trying too hard to be edgy. Industrial buildings turned into artist lofts, with exposed brick and windows that hadn't been properly sealed since the Carter administration. The kind of place where you paid premium rent to live like a bohemian, as long as your definition of bohemian included granite countertops and a doorman. Ryland's building was on the seedier end of the spectrum. No doorman, no granite, just a buzzer system that looked like it predated the internet. I didn't need to buzz up, though. A delivery guy was leaving just as I arrived, and I slipped in behind him like I belonged there. Unit 4B. The hallway smelled like incense and poor life choices. I could hear music through the door, acoustic guitar, and a voice that thought it was much better than it actually was. Rylan was home, probably working on his art. I didn't knock. Instead, I pulled out my phone and sent him a text from a burner number I'd set up earlier. "Emergency at Nadia's shop. She needs you there now. Back entrance." The music stopped. I heard footsteps, then the sound of someone moving around quickly. Within 5 minutes, the door opened and Rylan rushed out, guitar case in hand, looking like a man on a mission to save his meal ticket. He was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, thin, with the kind of carefully cultivated scruff that takes more effort to maintain than a clean shave. Designer jeans that were probably a gift from Nadia, and boots that had never seen actual work. I waited until he was gone, then got to work. The lock on his door was a joke, the kind of thing you could open with a credit card if you knew what you were doing. And after growing up in a neighborhood where people locked themselves out regularly, I definitely knew what I was doing. His apartment was a shrine to his own perceived greatness. Guitars everywhere, half-finished songs scattered around, and photos of himself performing at open mic nights like they were sold-out stadium shows. I found what I was looking for in the bedroom, his pride and joy, a vintage Martin acoustic guitar that probably cost more than most people's cars. The kind of instrument that was more investment than tool. I didn't damage it. That would have been too obvious, too crude. Instead, I made a few subtle adjustments, loosened the tuning pegs just enough that they'd slip under pressure, adjusted the bridge so the intonation would be off. Small things that would make the guitar sound terrible without any visible signs of tampering. Then I left a note inside the case. Pay your own rent, Rockstar. By the time Rylan got back from his wild goose chase to Nadia's shop, I was long gone. But I wasn't done with him yet. Friday night, I knew exactly where to find him. According to his Instagram, he had a regular gig at a dive bar called The Underground, playing acoustic sets for tips and whatever audience wandered in off the street. I arrived early and positioned myself at the bar where I could watch the show. Greg was working, which meant I had backup if things got interesting. You sure about this? Greg asked, sliding me a beer. Guy looks like he could be trouble. I looked at Rylan setting up on the tiny stage, struggling with his mysteriously malfunctioning guitar. Trust me, he's not the type. The performance was even worse than I'd hoped. Every song sounded off-key, every chord change was a struggle, and Rylan's confidence evaporated as the audience started to lose interest. By the third song, people were actively leaving. That's when he spotted me at the bar. Recognition dawned slowly across his face. He'd probably seen photos of me on Nadia's social media, heard my name enough times to know who I was, the guy whose money had been keeping him afloat for the past 6 months. He finished his set to scattered, polite applause and made a beeline for the bar. You're Holden, he said, trying to sound casual. Nadia's friend. Ex-fiancée, I corrected. As of last Sunday, but I think you already knew that. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. What happened between you and Nadia? What happened, I interrupted, is that my fiancé spent the last 6 months funding your lifestyle with money we were supposed to be using for our wedding. What happened is that you've been living in an apartment I've been paying for, playing music on equipment I bought, eating food I provided. I didn't know. Bullshit. I kept my voice calm, conversational. You knew exactly what was happening. You just didn't care because it wasn't your problem. Rylan straightened up, trying to look tough. What do you want from me? Nothing, I said, finishing my beer. I already got what I wanted. Which is? I smiled. Your landlord evicted you this morning. Turns out she doesn't appreciate tenants who lie about their income sources on their lease applications. Your band dropped you after that video of your performance tonight goes viral. Tessa was here earlier, got some great footage of your guitar troubles. And Nadia. I paused for effect. Well, let's just say she's got bigger problems than keeping you in guitar strings. The color drained from his face. You can't do this. I didn't do anything, I said, standing up. I just stopped doing things, stopped paying your rent, stopped funding your dreams, stopped pretending I didn't know what was going on. He grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. You snake. That was his mistake. I'm not a fighter, never have been. But I'm not small, and I've been working out regularly for the past 5 years. More importantly, I was stone sober while Rylan had been drinking liquid courage all evening. I didn't hit him. I didn't have to. I just grabbed his wrist, applied pressure to a specific point I'd learned in a self-defense class, and watched him let go of my arm very quickly. Here's some free advice, I said quietly. Find a new city. Find a new girl. Find a new life. Because if I see you near Nadia again, if I hear you've been bothering her or trying to get back into her good graces, you'll discover that I can be a lot less charitable than I've been tonight. I released his wrist and patted his cheek gently, just hard enough to be insulting. Have a great evening, Rockstar. The next morning, Rylan's vintage Mustang was found in the parking garage beneath his old apartment building. Someone had poured sugar in the gas tank, slashed all 4 tires, and etched "loser" into the paint on both doors. The security cameras in that particular section of the garage had mysteriously malfunctioned the night before. The beautiful thing about a good revenge plan is that it develops its own momentum. By Saturday morning, I barely had to do anything. The dominoes were falling all by themselves. Nadia's parents called her at 7 a.m. I know this because she called me at 7:15, sobbing into the phone like her world was ending. Which, to be fair, it was. "They cut me off," she wailed. "My own parents cut me off. They said I've embarrassed the family, that I'm financially irresponsible, that I need to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. "Imagine that," I said, pouring myself coffee in my peaceful, Nadia-free apartment. "This is all your fault. You turned them against me." "I sent them bank statements, Nadia, your bank statements. If the truth turned them against you, maybe the problem isn't the messenger." "I need money, Holden. The vendors are threatening to sue me. Margot says she's going to dissolve our partnership. I could lose the boutique." "Then I guess you should have thought about that before you decided to fund your midlife crisis with our wedding budget." The line went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had changed from desperate to calculating. "You know what? Fine. You want to play hardball? I can play hardball too. I'm coming to your little party tonight." "My what?" "Your dodged-a-bullet party. Tessa told me all about it. You think you can humiliate me in public and just walk away? Think again." She hung up before I could tell her that I'd never actually planned a party. The whole thing had been a throwaway line designed to salvage my dignity at that disastrous brunch. But apparently, the idea had taken on a life of its own. My phone started buzzing with texts from people I hadn't talked to in months, all asking about the party. Greg had taken it upon himself to spread the word, and now half the city seemed to think I was throwing some kind of celebration. "Might as well make it official," Greg said when I called him. "I've already ordered extra champagne." So that's how I ended up hosting a party I'd never planned, celebrating the end of a relationship that had imploded in the most public way possible. The rooftop bar was packed by 8 o'clock. Friends, co-workers, acquaintances, and a surprising number of people I didn't recognize, but who seemed to know all about my situation. Word had spread through social media like wildfire, turning my personal drama into the week's entertainment. Everyone wanted to hear the story. How I'd discovered the affair, what I'd said at brunch, how I'd handled the aftermath. I found myself holding court like some kind of breakup guru, dispensing wisdom about relationships and revenge to anyone who'd listen. "The key," I told a group of admirers, "is to never let them see you sweat." She wanted me to be devastated, to beg her to come back. Instead, I thanked her for her honesty and walked away with my dignity intact. The crowd ate it up. I was the hero of my own story, the underdog who'd outmaneuvered his cheating ex-fiancée through superior strategy and emotional intelligence. That's when Nadia arrived. She swept onto the rooftop like she was making an entrance at a movie premiere, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary and an expression that could freeze hell. The party went quiet. Conversations faded mid-sentence as everyone turned to watch the confrontation they'd been hoping for all evening. Well, Nadia announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent rooftop. "If it isn't the man of the hour. Tell me, Holden, are you enjoying your little revenge fantasy?" I raised my champagne glass in her direction. "I'm enjoying the company of people who actually like me. You remember what that's like, don't you? Having friends who aren't paid to be there?" A few people laughed. Nadia's face flushed red. "You think you're so clever," she said, stepping closer. "You think you've won something here. But you know what you really are? You're a bitter, small man who can't handle the fact that I outgrew you." "Outgrew me?" I laughed. "Nadia, you're 32 years old and you've never paid for anything yourself. Your parents bought your car, your education, your business. I paid for your lifestyle, your hobbies, your secret boyfriend's rent. The only thing you've ever grown is your sense of entitlement." The crowd was loving it. Phones were out, recording every word. This was going to be all over social media within the hour. "At least I'm not pathetic enough to throw a party because my relationship ended," Nadia shot back. "You're right," I said. You're pathetic enough to crash a party thrown by the man whose life you tried to destroy. Tell me, how's Rylan doing? Still returning your calls? That hit home. Nadia's composure cracked for just a moment, long enough for everyone to see the pain underneath the anger. We're working things out, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Really? Because I heard he left town yesterday. Something about needing space to find himself. Funny how quickly true love fades when the money runs out. Nadia lunged at me then, all pretense of dignity forgotten. She grabbed my champagne glass and threw the contents in my face, then tried to slap me for good measure. I caught her wrist easily, holding it just tight enough to stop the blow without hurting her. Red wine would have been more dramatic, I said calmly, wiping champagne from my face with my free hand. But I suppose beggars can't be choosers. The crowd erupted. People were laughing, cheering, recording everything. Nadia looked around wildly, suddenly realizing that she was outnumbered, surrounded by people who were enjoying her humiliation. "You're all pathetic," she screamed, "sitting here celebrating someone else's misery like it's entertainment." "We're celebrating honesty," I said. "Something you might want to try sometime." Security appeared then. Greg had called them the moment Nadia started getting physical. Two large men in black shirts who looked like they'd handled this kind of situation before. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to leave," one of them said politely but firmly. "This is ridiculous. I have every right to be here." "Actually, you don't," I said. "This is a private event on private property, and you weren't invited." As security escorted her toward the exit, Nadia turned back for one final shot. "You'll regret this, Holden. When you're alone and miserable, you'll remember what you threw away." I smiled and raised my fresh champagne glass. "I'll remember what threw itself away. There's a difference." The crowd cheered as she disappeared down the stairs, her dramatic exit complete. But I wasn't done with her yet. His pride wasn't the only thing bruised. Sometimes when you play the underdog, you bite. Sunday morning brought the kind of clarity that only comes after a perfect storm. Nadia's public meltdown at the party had been satisfying, but it wasn't enough. She still had her boutique, her social media following, her ability to spin the story in her favor. That needed to change. I'd been saving the best for last, and it involved a conversation I'd had with my Aunt Ruth 3 weeks earlier. Ruth was my father's sister, a sharp-tongued woman in her 70s who'd made a fortune in real estate by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else in the room. She'd never liked Nadia. "That girl's got champagne taste and a beer budget," she'd said over dinner one night, "and she's spending your beer budget to afford the champagne." Ruth had been right about a lot of things, including her prediction that Nadia would eventually show her true colors. What I hadn't told anyone was that Ruth had also made me an offer that night, one I'd kept in my back pocket like a nuclear option. "If you ever need to teach someone a lesson about financial responsibility," she'd said with a wicked grin, "you let me know. I've got some ideas." Sunday afternoon, I called in that favor. "It's time," I told her. "About damn time," Ruth replied. "I've been looking forward to this." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Ruth owned more property in the city than most people realized, including several buildings in the artsy district where Nadia's boutique was located. She didn't own Nadia's building directly, but she had connections with the people who did. More importantly, she had information. "Your little princess has been 3 months behind on rent," Ruth told me. "The only reason she hasn't been evicted is that the landlord's been hoping she'd catch up. But if someone were to buy out her lease..." "How much?" "For the building? 2.5 million. But I'm not buying the building, dear. I'm buying the debt. Much cheaper, and it gives me all the leverage I need." By Monday morning, Ruth owned Nadia's lease, her outstanding debt, and effectively her entire business. The boutique that Nadia thought was her independence was actually a house of cards built on other people's money. Her parents, mine, and now Ruth's. But I wasn't ready to play that card yet. First, I wanted to see how far Nadia would go to save herself. The answer, as it turned out, was pretty far. Tuesday evening, she showed up at my apartment. Not the apartment we'd shared. I'd moved out of that the day after the brunch incident, but my new place across town. Somehow, she'd tracked down my address. She was different from the woman who'd crashed my party. Gone was the designer dress and perfect makeup. Instead, she looked tired, desperate, human in a way I hadn't seen in years. "We need to talk," she said when I opened the door. "No, we don't. Please, Holden, 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She stood in my living room looking around at the space I'd created without her. Simple, clean, peaceful. "I made a mistake," she said finally. "Which one? There have been so many lately." "All of them. Rylan, the money, the way I ended things. I was confused, scared about the wedding, about committing to forever. I handled it badly. You handled it like a selfish child who wanted to have her cake and eat it too. You're right." She sat down on my couch without being invited, a presumption that would have annoyed me a week ago, but now just seemed pathetic. "I was selfish. But we can fix this. We can work through it." "Fix what, Nadia? The lies, the cheating? The fact that you publicly humiliated me in front of 50 people because you were too cowardly to have an honest conversation? I'll pay you back. Every penny I spent on Rylan, every dollar from the wedding fund. My parents will help." "Your parents cut you off, remember?" Her face crumpled slightly. "They'll come around. They always do. And the boutique is doing well." "No, it's not." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean your boutique is failing, Nadia. You're 3 months behind on rent, your business partner wants out, and half your vendors won't work with you anymore because of what happened last week." "How do you know that?" I smiled. "Because I make it my business to know things. It's what I do for a living, remember?" The color drained from her face as the implications sank in. "You've been sabotaging me." "I've been letting you sabotage yourself. There's a difference." She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "This is insane. You're destroying my life over a mistake." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just not cleaning up your messes anymore. For the first time in our relationship, you're experiencing the actual consequences of your actions." "I loved you," she said, and for a moment, she almost sounded sincere. "No, you didn't. You loved what I provided, the stability, the security, the ability to play at being independent while someone else paid the bills. You loved having a safety net that let you take risks without facing consequences. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you paid for dinner? When's the last time you worried about money, or rent, or whether you could afford something you wanted? When's the last time you faced a problem that you couldn't solve by batting your eyelashes and letting someone else handle it?" She didn't have an answer for that. "Here's the thing, Nadia. I did love you. For 8 years, I loved you enough to enable your worst impulses because I thought that's what love was. But love isn't supposed to be a one-way transaction. It's not supposed to be one person giving everything while the other person takes everything and asks for more." "So what now?" she asked quietly. "You just walk away?" "I already walked away. This conversation is just you refusing to accept that." She left without another word, and I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. Wednesday night, I got a call from Greg. "You need to see this," he said. "Nadia's at the bar, and she's not alone." I found her at a corner table with Tessa and Freddie, the remnants of her social circle rallying around her in her time of need. She was crying, not the pretty, delicate tears of a movie heroine, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone whose world was genuinely falling apart. "It's not fair," she was saying as I approached. "He's trying to ruin me. Everything I've worked for, everything I've built. Everything you built with other people's money, I said, sliding into the empty chair across from her. The table went quiet. Tessa's hand moved instinctively toward her phone, but I shook my head. Not tonight. This is off the record. What do you want? Freddie asked, his usual theatrical flair replaced by genuine hostility. To make an offer, I said, looking directly at Nadia. One last chance to end this with some dignity intact. I'm listening, she said, wiping her eyes. Walk away. Tonight. Leave the city. Start over somewhere else. And I'll make sure your debts get settled quietly. No lawsuits, no public embarrassment, no bankruptcy filing that follows you around for the next 7 years. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone and showed her a document that Ruth had sent me earlier. A foreclosure notice ready to be filed that would shut down her boutique and seize all assets to cover outstanding debts. Then tomorrow morning, this gets filed with the city. By Friday, you'll be out of business. By next week, it'll be in the papers. By next month, you'll be working retail somewhere, trying to explain to potential employers why your last business failed so spectacularly. Nadia stared at the document, her face cycling through shock, anger, and finally, resignation. You bastard, she whispered. I'm the bastard who's offering you a way out. Take it. She looked around the table at her friends, searching for support, for someone to tell her to fight back. But Tessa was staring at her phone, and Freddie was studying his drink like it held the secrets of the universe. Fine, she said finally. I'll go. But this doesn't make you the good guy, Holden. This makes you a monster. Maybe, I said, standing up, but I'm a monster who pays his own bills. I left her there with her friends, crying into her overpriced cocktail and mourning the life she'd built on other people's foundations. Thursday morning, Ruth made it official. The foreclosure notice was filed, the boutique was seized, and Nadia's business assets were liquidated to cover her debts. By the time the paperwork was complete, there was nothing left. Friday afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. Leaving town today. I hope you're happy. I was. Saturday morning, I woke up in my peaceful apartment, made coffee in my own kitchen, and read the newspaper without anyone commenting on my choice of breakfast or asking me to fund their dreams. For the first time in 8 years, my life was completely my own. Some flowers wilt, some burn. Tonight, I wasn't just the groom, I was the gardener with a flamethrower.